Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Could UFO secrecy have more to do with corporate money than government paranoia? If there really is alien technology loose out there, how successful have we been at using it ourselves? Can paranormal energies be used commercially?
Hey, and welcome to the 176th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and it's time for our weekly paranormal contest. We're getting right to it this week.
That's right.
So, Amy Boyle from Boston correctly answered last week's question: in what U.S. state does Sinkhole Sam live?
Now, Sam is reputedly a lake monster from Kansas.
I guess we're not in Kansas anymore.
No, apparently not. Amy's won before, I think.
Well, yeah, she's in New York, so.
Yeah.
All right,
Boston, actually.
Boston. Why did I say New York? All right, so this week's question is, what is considered the most haunted place in Japan? If you can deal with that, call us locally at 401-766-1240 or nationally at 800-449-1240. Or you can email us at eno@onworldwide.com, and if nobody gets it before the end of the show, drop a line to me at banditbehindtheparanormal.com. And the winner gets a copy of Left at East Gate, a first-hand account of Rendlesham Forest UFO incidents and its cover-up and investigation, co-authored by tonight's guest.
Peter Robbins, who has been on our show before, I'm happy to say, has been involved in UFO studies for 25 years as a researcher, investigator, writer, lecturer, best-selling author, and currently as executive assistant to the alien abduction expert Bud Hopkins' Intruders Foundation. He also serves as head of the UFO Media Group of Central Park Media Corporation and as editor-in-chief of the groundbreaking website UFOcity.com. Excuse me. Peter has lectured on the subject of UFOs for more than 20 years and in more than 20 states and 4 countries, especially the United Kingdom. Lecture topics have included, but not been limited to, the suppression of UFO information by the American and British governments, James V. Forrestal, the first U.S. Secretary of Defense, and his relationship with UFOs, Dr. Wilhelm Reich and UFOs, the RAF Bentwaters UFO incident in the UK, also known as the Rendlesham Forest incident, the UFO abduction phenomenon, and the media and UFOs. Peter has been a guest and a consultant on many television and radio shows, including The Geraldo Show, Unsolved Mysteries, A Current Affair, and, of course, Behind the Paranormal, where he has been indispensable in helping to produce our highly acclaimed radio series on the Rendlesham Forest incidents. Peter is co-author, along with Rendlesham eyewitness Larry Warren, of the British bestseller, as Ben just announced, Left at East Gate, a first-hand account of the Bentwaters Woodbridge UFO incident, its cover-up and investigation. Peter lives in New York City, and his website, once again, www.ufocity.com.
Peter Robbins, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Or we might say welcome home, because you're...
Good evening, Ben and Paul. Good to hear your voices.
Good to hear you. And let me just, actually, Ben is going to remind us of our call-in numbers today.
Yeah, let me remind them.
Sorry.
Our call-in numbers today are 401-766-1240 locally and 800-449-1240 from anywhere in the U.S. And email is eno@onworldwide.com.
Now, Ben, I'm going to step on your lines once here because I think something is going on that
It's okay, I'm used to it.
Well, sorry, making me feel guilty.
It's okay.
Now, Peter, certainly the biggest paranormal news story of the day, of course, was the press conference this afternoon in Washington at the National Press Club on UFOs and nukes, and of course that really, I suppose, plays right into our subject matter tonight.
Yes.
I have seen very little coverage of that. Have you?
Well, I actually have been seeing a fair amount today, and if I might take a moment just to thank you for your introduction, but also to say it was a little dated, and dear old UFOcity.com has not existed for about 5 years, so I don't want folks going searching for it.
Well, news travels slowly in Rhode Island sometimes.
But yes, there has been some reporting on it. Again, this is a breaking story. I would say we will all do well to check large and small media venues tomorrow, and it will be reported. I think the big question is the tone and the spirit of the reporting, which I hope will be respectful, and because we had a number of distinguished, honorable Air Force officers involved in this event at the National Press Club, including retired Deputy Base Commander of RAF Bentwaters, Charles I. Halt, relative to the nuke incursion by UFOs there, which Larry Warren and I helped break in Left at East Gate. I think this one may actually receive more serious treatment than such stories usually do receive by major media.
Boy, I certainly hope so. Well, of course, yesterday's broadcast was our Rendlesham 4 show. I'm sorry to say you weren't with us, but you will be. As a matter of fact, you'll be co-hosting with us on the October edition at the end of the month. And but we did have Colonel Hall call in because he was in transit to Washington for this press conference. And Nick Pope did a masterful job of hosting with us and anchoring the panel. We also had John Burroughs and Jim Penniston with us, and we had quite a discussion. There was a tremendous. The amount of email we received from around the world after the show was tremendous. Tremendously encouraging, and also said that we had gotten the point across of what was going on. And Chuck Hall did not want to say much about what he was going to say today.
Yes, that's appropriate.
Naturally, and in a way, I feel rather sorry for him because he's in the middle of a lot of this, and a lot has been done to, they say, mess with these fellows. Well, you know better than I. So I just wanted to sort of mention that event that occurred today, and for people to watch the news for it and to take it seriously. And I don't know about you, Peter. We've talked about this privately, but what really steams my clams is that I really believe, and Ben does too, that between now and the coming up toward 2018, 2020, when all these electromagnetic and astronomical phenomena, which astronomers have confirmed are going to be going on, I think there's going to be an outbreak of things like this. If our theories are anywhere near true, the paranormal is going to be front and center in the news, and I think people need to pay attention now to these things so they will at least have some knowledge of. There isn't very much knowledge for sure about what these things are.
It'll be like Ghostbusters.
Yeah, they were taking over New York.
More than New York, everything else.
That sort of thing.
Well, again, there are certain neighborhoods in New York they better be careful.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, moving on from that, Ben, take it away.
Right, now for something completely different. All right, so, Peter, what connections could corporations have with UFOs and alien technology?
Yeah, well, this is a subject, of course, that if we had a full 3-hour show or a 30-hour show, we would still have a lot of territory to cover, so I'll be jumping around a bit. Number one, let's take a look at the desirability. If, like you, like Paul, like myself, Nick, many people in the field who have studied this seriously for years, you reach the point, not based on belief or faith, but a preponderance of evidence that leads you to understand beyond a reasonable doubt that the phenomena, to quote General Nathan Twining, is something real and not visionary or fictitious. In the real world, one has to take a look at the value, and I mean the value in monetary terms, in strategic terms, in what it represents in terms of power on the world stage, of possessing, harnessing, and being able to utilize the kind of spin-off technology that we're talking about. There is a phrase that we're all familiar with in the field of reverse engineering, which refers to the idea that a craft of unknown origin, advanced technology, has been taken down to the hairpins, that we have figured out some of the basics of this technology, and it forms a part of the digital revolution, be it fiber optics or the internet or other things that made that jump from the tube radios that we grew up with. Now, I think it's worth more than anything imaginable. As Stan Friedman has pointed out numerous times, whichever nation is the first to crack this code and truly possess this technology in a workable way wins all of the marbles. The game is over. There is only one force to deal with, and that's the one that has the biggest toys that do the most damage or the most effect. We have a history that is now beginning to kind of come out from under the covers of corporate involvement with aspects of this subject. One of them is actually coming out of the legendary Skunk Works in California, which is the McDonnell Douglas test area, and a book called Skunk Works, which was written by Ben R. Rich and Leo Janos, discusses this at length. The book is phenomenal, and Ben Rich, who, thank goodness, spoke about it on a number of occasions while he was alive, he's passed now, was a major player at the Skunk Works and with the aerospace industry, and is circumspect on certain things because he has to be. At one point, he's discussing in a lecture in 1993 that nobody should ask him about the so-called Aurora project, and says, I can't answer, and if I did, I'd be thrown in jail. There are some representatives of the CIA here. Now, again, it's always easy to sound self-aggrandizing and dramatic, and, you know, I'm involved in some big deal, but there are people. Look at Robert Wood, Dr. Robert Wood, who is one of our most valuable people in the field. He has one of the most remarkable, distinguished careers in the aerospace industry, has had ever so many top-secret clearances, and is somebody who has been very forthcoming about what he has learned, deduced, or understood. It's not all just leaks and possibilities that we're dealing with here. There are real people coming forward and putting some of this material, as well as they can, on the record to the degree that they are able right now.
Well, it's funny because this entire subject, and because we're primarily ghost researchers, you know, and I've been doing that for 40 years, and we're relatively new to the UFO field as far as getting into any depth, and you have to do that if you're going to be a decent talk show host on the subject, I think. And getting to know people like you has been a tremendous help. But Stan Friedman is the one who kind of mentioned on this show something that got us cooking on this subject, and that was, I said, well, what about government secrecy, and you know, their fears that, what are they afraid of, and their fears that society will collapse or religion won't mean anything anymore. And he said, well, don't underestimate the influence of corporate greed here, or the accumulation of alien technology or acquisition of it by corporations. He said, that is a major factor. And that hadn't even occurred to me before.
Yes, and I know that for some of your listeners, again, this may sound wacky or far out, but if one really studies the subject and finds the information that is credible, your worldview begins to change. Let me give you an example, and it's an important thing to reflect on occasionally. Where we are in terms of our civilian lives here, with some of the wonderful hardware, toys, technological advances, which we actually have, where are we compared to where the technology actually is at its most highly classified levels? Remember that the SR-71, the Blackbird, our extraordinary spy plane that could climb 10,000 feet a minute, could cruise at 120,000 feet, was capable of going Mach 2 and possibly Mach 3, was deployed at the end of the Eisenhower administration. This is technology that's over half a century old and is now considered obsolete. The so-called Aurora that I mentioned previously is the name that we have given to the as-of-yet replacement that we understand has taken its place, which may in fact be a craft so advanced in its abilities that it can mimic what we associate could only be done by craft from undetermined origin.
That's the plane that can fly directly into space, supposedly, right?
Well, that's our understanding.
Yeah.
And that it can stop on a dime and hover. I ask anybody who has an iPhone to contemplate and reflect on it while you're having fun with the screen, and think to yourself, if this is what has been allowed to filter down to the civilian realm as a toy and communication device, so to say, that we're having a lot of fun with, what in the name of God does that reflect that is classified at the highest levels? And is that something that we developed on our own, which we may have, or that we have based on more advanced technology?
Well, then I don't like aliens because I don't really like my iPhone.
Well,
Go ahead with your next question.
All right, so speaking of iPhones, what applications could this technology have?
Militarily or...
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think here we're only limited by our imaginations in some sense.
Well, that could be the problem.
Well, in a way it is. It's like having an open mind that's so open that your brain falls out.
Yeah.
We are dealing with not just a Pandora's box here, but a Pandora's box that once opened has 1,000 more lids looking at us. And none of them terribly any more wild or weird than any of the others. In an ironic way, the extraterrestrial hypotheses as representative of truly anomalous unidentified flying objects is among the most conservative. And I would also postulate that we're not talking, when we say UFOs, we in the UFO research community who are serious about this subject do not jump at every, unknown that is reported. I feel that the overwhelming majority of these things are explainable either in some kind of conventional terms or that indeed we are looking at our own technology that either seems to mimic some of this super advanced technology that is still the subject of lore, realm, and legend, but may well simply be reality that we are not letting on to. The question, as Stan Friedman has put it, to paraphrase him ever so slightly, is not, are UFOs machines from other worlds under intelligent control? The real question is, have any of them ever been? And I think the answer to that is an overwhelming yes. And if there's only ever been one, it's about the biggest story that we've ever had to look at.
Does that answer your question, man?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Let's look at all this in the context. We like to look at... you're a veteran of this show. We like to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
Let's look at the totality of human history and prehistory as far as we know it.
Sure.
We've had whole shows on the possible effect of the paranormal in the broadest sense of the word, including Von Däniken-like alien, paleo contact, as the theory goes. And it's frozen people's socks off. People said they couldn't sleep. And when you look at the question of alien technology, what do we know, when did we know it, you could argue, as do many Native American tribes and other ancient civilizations, that we have gone from, as it were, I suppose, little stone hammers to power drills as many as 4 times in our prehistory. And I pinned Stan Friedman down on that one time. And I said, you made a statement 30 years ago. I heard him lecture 30 years ago. And I said, I've never heard you explain it. And it was that he mentioned off the cuff that for the first time in at least the last few thousand years we're venturing out into space, implying that we'd done so before that. And I said, did you really mean that? Do you believe that we have attained the so-called advanced civilization before? And he said, yeah, sure. Because there are indications of that. When I was doing research, starting in the seminary and then going on into the paranormal, into ancient documents such as the original versions of Genesis, as much as we have them, or the Atrahasis of the Akkadians, or the Karsag epics of the Sumerians, they all, as I'm sure you know, all tell a similar story. And there are things like the Mahabharata, the great poem of India, the Song of India, that tell of wars and in detail that really freezes the blood.
It discusses the wars in part being fought by flying machines where schematics are laid out.
Yeah, the Vermont. Yeah, exactly. And actually, I had a friend who was doing research at Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan, which is, and he was convinced that the place was destroyed by a nuclear explosion. Well, he said there were buildings that actually melted. You get and we can go on and on about this. We've done it in other shows, but the point being, do we trust this alien technology if that's what it is? Could it be a Trojan horse?
Again.
Anything, of course, is possible. I think, though, because you've just sort of blown some of your listeners' fuses on this thing, a very brief review should be undertaken. Erich von Däniken, of course, the Swiss-German journalist, was the first to introduce into popular culture this idea of historic and ancient or pre-biblical visitations. And I think he did us a tremendous service. But Eric was a journalist and not a scholar, and the fact that he has sold about 60 million books that I'm aware of.
It must be nice.
Worldwide. Yeah, right, exactly. He laid the groundwork for people like Zecharia Sitchin, who is truly a Sumerian scholar, to then write in the 1970s The 12th Planet. It's a terribly important seminal book. Sitchin is working from first-generation Sumerian translations, and as you said, this similar myth of the gods, plural, small g, coming down from heaven and interfacing with man and having children with the women of men and creating a new kind of being, do weave their way through a Judeo-Christian tradition as well as numerous others.
Sure looks that way.
The fact is, there are so many relics of pre-technological modern technology. When I was young and on the road, I remember visiting the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul, and there seeing the famous 2,000-year-old storage battery, which was actually functionally identical to a regular battery, except that it was in a clay pot rather than, wrapped in lead. I also saw that extraordinary Greek, we can only call it a computer, this extremely complex
the Antikythera device?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And these are the things that, as they say at the end of the Maltese Falcon, that dreams are made of, but also that reality may be made of. And there is a tremendous hubris in the modern world that nothing of any consequence was going on before, 4, 5, 7,000 years ago. The idea that either naturally or in a man-made way, we have observed the destruction of countless or numerous civilizations going back longer than anyone can imagine. And I mean the total and complete destruction, except in the realm of myth and legend. And so we're left with this extremely frustrating and incomplete picture of how things were. And it's much more comfortable to simply reject it and say, we are it, and nobody ever got to this point before, rather than to remember that there is an area in Iraq, Baalbek, where there is a shaped rectangular stone that weighs 60 tons sitting out on the desert, and that there is an area of desert floor nearby that is fused glass, which is, of course, superheated sand. It should not surprise anyone, and you don't have to be some big PhD. I think common sense suggests in the same way that the number of planets that we keep finding, mathematically, it's almost impossible that there isn't some other intelligent life out there, that there also is every likelihood that we have hit and passed the technological points we're at right now, either to lose them, again, in complete natural cataclysms, or by being involved in our still favorite episode, our activities on Earth here, which is drawing lines in the dirt and killing each other when we cross them.
Well, that's true. We're going to take a break in a moment, but just to by nature of an observation, the point of the discussion here is that I would like to know how. I don't trust these things. I don't watch a lot of movies, but somebody suggested that maybe the most accurate description of alien activity on Earth was that film Mars Attacks.
I love Mars Attacks.
And I watched it, and of course it's hilarious. And
it is. Those are the baddest bad aliens ever.
Well, these aliens come, and they give us enough rope, and they peal with laughter at our. And it could. I wonder if it's as simple as that, but I don't know. We run into, in our research, we long ago, 30 years ago, rejected the spiritualist thing that ghosts are spirits of the dead. We feel we're dealing with real parallel worlds, with real entities, some of whom are very non-human, some of whom can be called grays, and we're getting deeper and deeper into that as we go toward our television show that we're hoping to produce here.
Wonderful.
And it changes everything about your perception of reality and the paranormal and the whole business. And a lot of these critters just cannot be trusted. So we're going to come back to that theme in just a minute. We're going to take a commercial break, and you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on the WOON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com in New England's beautiful Blackstone Valley. Kind of a rainy day today, but nice anyway. And our guest, of course, Peter Robbins, our good friend, UFO expert, speaker, renowned author, and all-around good guy. We just wanted to remind you, of course, that very often people ask where they can get my books, and one of the places locally here in the northern Rhode Island, southern Massachusetts would be at the Museum of Work and Culture in the quiet city of Woonsocket, as a friend of ours calls it.
It's not really that quiet, so...
Well, it depends on your point of view. If my scooter is running, the muffler's gone, so it's not that quiet. But in any case, the Museum of Work and Culture, a wonderful place, Disney-quality exhibits about the industrial history of this area, which, of course, was a cradle of the American Industrial Revolution. And in the gift shop, they have all my books. You can also get them from our show website, BehindTheParanormal.com, or, of course, Amazon.com, etc. Now, Ben wanted to mention something. We are making an effort to expand our advertisers. We figured we've been told that with our shows combined, we do several shows, including one on CBS and, of course, Internet all over the world, that we have had up to 3 million listeners. We think that should sell a few ads. So go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so if we have had several publishing businesses that have sent us books for us to review and talk about on the air. So you can also advertise your books on the air, or your authors, and if they meet our criteria, we'll also have them on the air with us and have them talk about their books, and we'll interview them and also review the book ourselves. So we'll send out an email. Tell us if you're interested. You can reach us at our show email, Paul at BehindTheParanormal.com or Ben at BehindTheParanormal.com.
And, the advertising information is also online at BehindTheParanormal.com. And we're going to try to boil it down a little bit into we're told what should be called a one sheet. We're learning about the advertising business.
Yeah.
And the main reason for this is that we want to try and support the stations that carry the show, because they really they carry the show because they like it and they feel we're doing a service, and it kind of they feel stands above many of the other shows where they don't get as serious about this subject, maybe. So, anyway, we would appreciate if you have a business, especially anything to do with the new age things, as they call it, or anything that might have to do with publishing, let us know. Go to BehindTheParanormal.com or give Ben a call. The number's there.
Yes.
Call. And, the main reason here, of course, Ben needs a new car. So,
that I need to fund my musical experiments.
Yes, and his new college student as well. So there we are. So again, check the Museum of Work and Culture, and also check our advertising possibilities here on the show. So let's get back to Behind the Paranormal here, WOON 1240 AM, and our call-in numbers, 766-1240 locally in the 401 area code, or nationally 800-449-1240. So getting back to our good friend Peter Robbins. Peter, we were talking about alien technology, and and I often wonder if it is more of a threat than a blessing, whether it's intended that way or not. Look, for example, what we were talking about, the iPod technology. Technology of that kind has done to human society in quote-unquote developed countries. I mean, do you think it's good or bad, or is it neutral? I mean, what do you think?
I think that any technology can be utilized for the betterment or the dumbing down and the disintegration of our culture and of our relationships to each other and other life forms that may be out there. I know that I love listening to music, but I'm fascinated when I travel in New York City on, say, the subway, and I see half the people with their ears plugged up and completely out of contact with what's going on in that car. Not that, that's a wonderful thing, but it's so easy to stick a pair of earbuds in your ears nowadays and just, groove on your favorite tunes. How long will it be? And I mean just a matter of a few short years before people are wearing, those kind of glasses that give you a sense that you're watching a absolutely first-rate film on a huge screen. Mm-hmm. And, maybe you'll just have an option to, touch a little switch and you can see beyond. But otherwise, it's so seductive. And you look at somebody like a Rupert Murdoch, who is truly dumbing down the Western culture by tabloidizing our understanding of the news, the slackened ability of young people to debate, to actually have conversations. I wonder how video games have rewired the younger generation's brains right now. It's so much easier to train people to use lethal technology if you're simply pushing a button and, a blip on the horizon disappears. It's not like the reality that one had to face in taking responsibility for going up against another person with the lives of both of you at hand. We can be manipulated brilliantly with technology, not necessarily, but I think we're standing on the edge of a time when there will be more and more people who will simply fade into the woodwork of the comfort of the constant hum in their ears and that next DVD that they're going to watch, and not be so worried about the world affairs or politics. I've got my little job and I'm doing okay, and I work for, a corporation is pretty good. So I think I am concerned. I am deeply concerned. And again, there may be a absolute panoply, a pantheon of different intelligences from different universes, times, dimensions, galaxies, us in the future, that may have the full sweep of intentions toward us, from the benign and the supportive to as nasty as we can be to each other. And maybe with some good cause. This wonderful little blue-green ball that we call home, we are not being good shepherds of. We are the vermin that are infesting it on a certain very real, dispassionate level. And we are going to kill our home if we do not get serious and understand the impact of, starting back like you were saying, the early days of the Industrial Revolution are finally coming home to roost. And folks are either taking responsibility for it or rejecting it. I think it's fascinating, for example, that the Fox network, there is a certain amount of the ownership of the Fox network that is under the holdings of the Saudi royal families.
Really?
One can, and this is verifiable. This is not some deep, dark secret. Mr. Murdoch has made business deals with them. You cannot say that about CNBC or really most of the other major news venues, certainly that I've looked into or am aware of. And isn't it interesting how, aside from maintaining increasingly right-wing points of view, all of the commentators on Fox are decidedly anti the possibilities of environmental craziness gone wrong here, and the fact that we are doing this and it's not just something natural that happens every X number of thousands of years, and all those folks on the left being led by Al Gore are just a bunch of goofballs and hippies that want us to spend our hard-earned money keeping rare frogs alive.
Well, there are a couple of people don't strike me as all conservative, like Geraldo and everything. But anyway, I want to get back to our point, Ben.
Yeah. All right. So, would you feel that with all this influx of this technology that could have descended from aliens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, do you think it has some sort of effect on us, that humans are devolving?
Good. Yeah, evolution in reverse is a term I sometimes hear.
Yeah. That's
in other words, people are getting dumber.
Well, I know fewer and fewer people that read for pleasure, and fewer of them who read books that we know are important, meaningful classics. It's not very hip right now. It's much cooler to watch things and to listen to things. The educational level in this country, unfortunately, is getting worse and worse. And like sheep, we are simply following it into a certain kind of oblivion, with a resignation that, things in my lifetime will never be as good as my parents had a shot at it, and so why even try? I should just have some fun, get a job where I can pay my bills and not worry about things, because who can really change it anyway? Resignation, for me, is about the most dangerous word, and we are being fed it one way or the other on a daily basis through our media, through our popular culture, or to lose ourselves in fantasy or complete mysticism, i.e., like you're talking about these other intelligences, what we don't understand, we either tend to mystify or reject. And welcome to part of the world of theology, as well as, the occult. We're easily led, aren't we?
We are. Just a comment on that thought. I know Ben has more, but when we first got into the, again, I've been working in the paranormal field for over 40 years, but I've never had much to do with a lot. I didn't speak a lot. I mean, I did, after the first recent book came out in 1998, but I wasn't too involved in as part of the community, as it were, the research community, because I didn't take a lot of them very seriously. But I have found since then, especially when we started the show a few years ago, and have gotten to know everyone much better than I had before, that there are many very serious, clear-thinking people who are interested in the paranormal, and that's what this show tries to do. That's what the TV show is going to try to reach out to these people who are turned off by the shallow nature of these things. So I think that there is part of the paranormal community, if you want to call it that, that is intellectually sharp and bright and questioning, in a good sense. Of course, there are always the, people who, go to the psychic, am I going to find love next week, that sort of thing. So it's a microcosm of society, as is any other group.
Yes.
So, but I'm sorry, just wanted to make that observation. Go ahead.
Well, I completely lost my point.
Well, I'm
you're
sorry. I tend
right.
See, I'm doing what the aliens are doing. I'm doing it on the smaller scale of my son.
You've just dumbed each other down.
Well, there we go.
Right.
That's a reassuring thought, isn't it?
But you're absolutely right. We have some really world-class scholars, terrific thinkers, people who are very studied in the fields that they
certainly
are working.
Including yourself.
Well, thank you. But I'm not, I'm talking about folks, thank you. But Stanton Friedman, for example, who is a nuclear physicist, or our friend Leslie Keene, whose book right now on UFOs is doing so well, and more power to Leslie.
Yep, she's going to be on the show early next year.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, it's an important book, UFOs, and I'm paraphrasing ever so slightly, pilots, government officials, and generals, and their take on the subject, so their experience with it. And again, today's press conference at the National Press Club, no matter how the media does deal with it tomorrow, this is an important story, and it's very important. Rather than read the reports, do that, but then go to YouTube and look at these men, one after the other, speaking. This is the real deal. And in fact, we are still laboring under that old mantra of it can't be, therefore it isn't, or we'd all know about it. And so if it's not that, it's got to be something else, which means people like me are either lunatics, fakers, cultists, wannabes, or just, cheerful deceivers. But of course it can't be, or we'd all know. Well, wrong.
Okay. Well, getting back to the issue of the technology itself, go ahead, Ben.
All right, so is there competition for this technology among companies?
We can only make educated guesses, of course, if we're not involved in that competition. I would say the answer to that is an overwhelming yes. Again, imagine that you are developing something based on something that was recovered from some advanced technological craft. And if you can understand it, recreate it, and manufacture it before your friends or your enemies in China, Russia, India, or wherever, you now have this technology and can lock on to producing results. For example, in the Rendlesham Forest incident, one of the arguments that was put forward was, why do you feel this wasn't a psyops operation of some sort that, these guys were mentally screwed around with and just made to have the impression that they were in the presence of other intelligences and craft of undetermined origin? That would be the coolest thing in the world, to be able to create on a battlefield the illusion in 3 dimensions and actuality that you are, dealing with an extraterrestrial or interdimensional enemy, and of course make you go screaming off the battlefield. Well, there are a number of good reasons why I don't feel the Rendlesham incident was that, but that's just one application that would be so valuable in winning all the marbles and being the biggest kid on the block with the most powerful toys.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, so is this global or just in certain countries?
I would imagine that every country that has engineers, scientists, an industrial base, and analytic facilities where they can begin to take this on is fair game and wide open for the possibilities. We now know that China has, for years, had its own share of UFO sightings, very akin to what we've been experiencing in the West for the same period of time. They've just simply had a complete blackout on it. We also know that there are a huge number of UFO organizations all over China, small regional ones, and most of their members are required to be engineers or more. Mm-hmm. Being a godless communist state, one can say, well, they'd probably support any thesis of extraordinary, activity that helps to put the kibosh on what they would call the God myth. But indeed, there is every reason to want to possess this technology and to master it, and no reasons that I can think of to not want to. Because if you ignore it, somebody else is going to get it.
Okay.
And sooner or later, if they crack the code, you're going to be under their heel.
Okay, Peter, we have a caller.
Yep.
And let's see who it is. Hello. Whoa. Okay. Welcome Behind the Paranormal.
Hi.
Hi, you're on the air. And can I ask your name, please? Your first name?
Yeah, this is Steve Fermani from
Steve. Okay.
Hiya, Steve.
Yeah, Steve Fermani, director of New England MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and organizer of the marvelous Exeter UFO Festival that we just enjoyed. Peter was there. We were there a few weeks ago. So go ahead and take it away, Steve.
Hey, Peter.
Hi, Steve. How you doing today?
So great to hear your voice again. Yeah,
you
it's been
too,
a while, huh? It's been an exciting day here.
Yes.
With the revelations from the
National Press Club right now.
Quite
a lineup of football officers they had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually, I just came off of an interview at New England Cable Network News this afternoon on that show. It went on around 5:30 tonight. So we're really kind of trying to push it as much as we can.
Uh-huh. Did anyone cover it live at the National Press Club?
None of the major networks did.
I know that it's going to be. It'll be all over YouTube and everything in the news tonight. But I didn't. We looked around at 12:30 and nobody was covering it live.
I think the main contributor to it was New England Cable Network News.
Okay, so tell us about. Have you heard any of the recordings of the press conference itself, Steve?
I've seen some.
Okay.
And it's pretty impressive testimony. It's pretty much people who were involved in the actual situations coming right out and saying the Air Force lied.
Yeah, I believe these were 6 military officers of high rank, including Colonel Halt.
Exactly. Including Halt. Yes.
And Robert Sala.
It's some pretty impressive contacts that we have here.
That's it. So, did you have a particular question for Peter?
Yeah, when we're going to start setting up for Exeter for next year?
Tomorrow.
Takes a lot of organization.
Yeah, and of course, what Steve and Paul are talking about is the second, what we hope will be annual, Exeter, New Hampshire UFO Festival and Conference that we were all part of in early September that went off wonderfully well. But yeah, I think that we will have, this is an anchor for an annual event here in the Northeast, and isn't it crazy that in the northeastern corner of the United States we really don't have much in the way of annual UFO conferences and events where the West and the Southwest certainly have a very good number of them. So,
and there's no reason for that, because there are amazing amounts of UFO activity in this area, and the history
completely
is mind-boggling. And Exeter itself being the general area where the Betty and Barney Hill affair of 1961 occurred, which was the first well-covered abduction incident in the U.S. So
indeed, no question about it. And
also, Peter, I just did this morning. I just did the interview with Jeff, the documentary producer.
Oh yes, of course.
I just met with Jeff this morning. As a matter of fact, when I was, it's been kind of a busy day for me, because when I was interviewing with Jeff, that's when the New England Cable Network News called. So,
your dance card is full.
Yes, definitely. I just wanted to call in and touch base. Email me.
Will do.
Need anything? Just let me know. And I'm really looking forward to next year.
Yeah, it'll be good too. I think next year it will be even more successful, and within the next few years we'll have a weekend-long event and a lot larger attendance, although we were pouring out the door this year.
And Paul and Ben, we hope to have you there again this year.
Oh, we wouldn't miss it. Do you have dates yet, Steve?
It would be fantastic, you know? I
Not
think everybody that we had together worked so well as a team, and I think you'll be back as part of the team.
That would be great. We'd love that, and we'll bring our equipment up, do some interviews, and have some fun.
Hopefully this time it'll work.
Yeah, we had equipment problems last time. Hey, it was first time. You know, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Okay,
that's great, Steve.
I'll let you guys go and get back to you. Get back to the last few minutes here on the show. I just wanted to call in, check in, and say hi.
Great to hear from you, Steve.
All the best
to you.
Very good.
Okay, thanks.
Talk to you soon.
Both of you.
Have a good one.
Take care now.
Okay. Right, so Peter, getting back to this issue of technology, there are all sorts of wild stories based on what came out of, well, first of all, the Roswell crash, or the alleged Roswell crash. Colonel Corso's book about how he was working with some of the technology, some of the materials that were recovered, and his job was to seed, as he put it, the technology into American industry. And our friend Bill Burns helped write that book and confirms his Colonel Corso's stories. And Velcro, everything from Velcro to things like the iPod and printed circuitry seem to supposedly come from this.
Well,
do you believe all that? I mean,
no, I don't. I think that the supposedly and the seems and the might-be's have to guide us. I'm from Missouri on this. You have to show me something, and that makes me a rather plodding, nuts and bolts investigator in this field. I don't get channeled messages from Martians. I don't have inside contacts deep within the National Security Agency. I do my best to triangulate and confirm based on other established facts. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm right and somebody else is wrong, but I think we in the research community and any serious student of UFOs or the paranormal have to be the most informed and critical skeptics possible. If we are not our best devil's advocates as we proceed up the ladder of investigation, we will fall on our face. Remember, again, that if you have been at this long enough, where, you in the realm of the paranormal, me in the realm of UFO studies, where you have seen enough evidence, come to the conclusion that these are real phenomena and not visionary or fictitious, that beyond any reasonable doubt, in a way you're hampered because not believe or have faith in, that it's as real as the chair that you're sitting in. Therefore, you may jump the gun and say, here's another case of such and such, rather than begin at the baseline and deductively go one step at a time to establish first that it is nothing of the major variety of mundane possibilities before you're working your way up into the unusual possibilities, before you're working your way up into the truly unusual possibilities. And if none of those fulfill the bill, then in fact you may be dealing with a truly anomalous situation. So I have to pick and choose, and that would go certainly for Colonel Corso's claims and anybody else's as well.
Okay. Go ahead, but I'm going to shift gears here a little bit.
All right. So, you actually work for the city of Roswell, New Mexico.
I hope I continue, but for the past 3 years, they have been a major employer of mine as a consultant and advisor on building responsible UFO tourism, of helping to organize their yearly
that answers the question.
UFO symposium, and of helping to oversee. I also act as a press liaison for them. They often send people in major or minor media to me to field questions or to discuss what we understand about the events of 1947 with them, and I'm very proud of my work with them. I, again, do hope that I continue. There is a new city administration now, and we wish them all the best. They have passed a budget this past month that does guarantee that there will be another major event next year, and I hope to be part of it. But it's been a very amazing job and quite an education as well.
Yeah, so what have you learned?
Well, that... gosh, what have I learned? Number one, that there is more scholarship and more to support the contentions of a crash of one or two totally anomalous objects on the plains of St. Augustine, not far from the then town and now small city of Roswell, New Mexico, that within the city itself there is an absolute variety of feelings and understandings and beliefs about the event, going from those folks who feel that the world is quietly making fun of them behind their back because of the allegations, and other ones who take great pride in the fact that one of the most paradigm-shifting events of all time may well have occurred in their backyard. And it informs politics, community of faith, average folks on the street, the business community, and it's kind of like a microcosm of the whole subject and the way that folks deal with it in the form of one community. I must say, it really, the human part of it is in a way what interests me more, because that is something that we can wrap our heads around. These other intelligences we can speculate on until we're blue in the face, but never know for sure what is going on, and maybe we never will.
That seems to be the ultimate conclusion we come to at the end of every show. We just don't know.
Yes.
But it sure is fun to look.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And again, it's okay not to know.
Well, that's true. That's right.
Keep an open mind and keep pushing.
Absolutely. Well, Peter, it's been a fantastic discussion. Thank you as always, and we certainly look forward to the end of October, when the last Sunday of October, when you'll be co-hosting with us the fifth in our Rendlesham Return to Rendlesham series, which is really gaining a lot of acclaim globally. And
kudos to Nick and the gang for the fine show yesterday. And again, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that the last Sunday of next month will be the 31st, i.e. Halloween, does not mean that we will be redoing the War of the Worlds or that it will be a lighthearted show. It's just the chance of the calendar.
Absolutely, that's true. Well, Peter, thank you so much, and we'll be talking.
You bet.
Okay.
Gentlemen, over and out for now.
Have a good one.
Okay. Very good. Now, let's continue here just with a few announcements. Again, watch for information on the news about that very, very interesting press conference at the National Press Club today about the UFOs and nukes, UFOs interfering with nuclear weapons systems, as testified to by various officers.
All right, so don't forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, and you can go to our show page, behindtheparanormal.com, and go to get our newsletter link. And, well, that's it for our September end of the month 4-hour Behind the Paranormal Marathon.
Yeah, this is the last show of that marathon.
Yep, so next week tune in to our regular Sunday show, October 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, on CBS New Sky Radio and www.newskyradio.com, when we'll welcome an anonymous policeman from Vermont. My dad and myself have been working on and with him against a nasty parasite, in which we can now call the Haunted Policeman case. Check it out.
Yeah, also check out our show website, again, behindtheparanormal.com, local radio schedules where CBS carries our show. Many thanks, of course, to our saintly producer, Craig Pelletier. We'll see you next Monday, October 4th on onworldwide.com and WOON 1240 AM in New England's beautiful Blackstone Valley. And next week's show is kind of hard to describe. Ben and I are going to take the hour, and we're going to be talking about, we haven't put it on the website yet because I don't know how to describe it. I suppose it's how to deal with the paranormal when you don't know anything about it whatsoever.
So for you first-timers to the show, this is one of the ones you want to hear.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. Because really, we look at this and we don't know anything about it, for sure. Again, everything you know is wrong. So in the meantime, we leave you with a quote from the Irish poet and novelist Oscar Wilde. The final mystery is oneself.
See you next week.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.